Hi, everybody. It's always nice to follow the mindfulness practice. So I am very excited today because I think this is a first in Compassion Consortium history that our special spiritual guest is actually special spiritual guests. And we have with us a very unusual and wonderful married couple. You're seeing on the screen Hope Bohanec, and she is here with her husband, Cogen Bohanec. Hope has been active in animal protection and environmentalism for over 30 years. She is executive director of Compassionate Living. She hosts the Hope for the Animals podcast. She co-founded the Humane Hoax Project and the Ahimsa Living Project, and she's published two books on humaneness and greenwashing. Cogen has his PhD in religious studies with an emphasis on Hinduism and a master's degree in Buddhist studies. He is currently an associate professor with the Arahanta Institute, a Jain learning and research institution, teaching Sanskrit and Dharma philosophy. So, welcome, Cogen and Hope. So, one thing I want to ask, we've had so many people on the Compassion Consortium talking about each one of these religions that I mentioned in the intro, but what ties them together? What makes us call Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism the Ahimsa religions? Either one of you, pick it up.
Well, I think it's astounding how many things that they agree on. They have some very fundamental polemic disagreements as well, too. But what they really have in common that ties them together is the word dharma. Dharma comes from the Sanskrit root dur. It's the things that you uptake, the things that you hold on to, the things that you bear. This is your ethical practices and such. And this leads to the idea of karma theory. That is that our actions will have equal reactions. So if we do the good things will happen to us. We do bad things will happen. And this will span multiple lifetimes, because this also, in terms of the Odyssey, reason why good things seem to happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, explains that, because we have karma that goes beyond this life. There's things that have happened in an infinite past of our previous lives that cause us to feel the things and experience the things that we're experiencing now. And so that cycle of being reborn and dying based on our karma, what positions of life, what degrees of suffering and happiness we'll experience, that ultimately leads to suffering, because when we go high, we are privileged, and when we become privileged, we tend to be more comfortable,
Complacent.
a little bit less sensitive to the suffering of others. And then that will cause us to be reborn again. So ultimately, even when we go up and down on this wheel, it all ultimately leads to our suffering, and that we have to somehow free ourselves from that cycle of suffering. So that's what the Dharma traditions agree on, though they'll all disagree on like how exactly to do that and what freedom from that looks like. So there's a short answer.
Well, I also would love a short answer to who decides what's good. Because I think we're seeing in our culture right now, people see that very, very differently. Some things that are viewed by some people and some groups as heroic are viewed by others as criminal. How does karma see it?
Well, karma is what we might call a theory of ethical realism. That means that right and wrong is not in the eye of the beholder, that right and wrong are objectively real qualities of classes of actions. Unnecessary violence has the quality. It's not material quality. It's not something you're going to find with a microscope or a telescope. But unnecessary violence, that class of actions, has the quality of being bad. It's objectively real. It's not a matter of opinion. If you decide that something's good is bad and something bad is good, it doesn't really matter, because we live in a just universe. And that's kind of the beauty, I think, of the karma theory, is that ultimately we live in a just universe and we all deserve things, right? Good things, bad things, everything. And we have to deal with that. We have to square with that. So right and wrong is an objectively real situation. Now, whether we discover that or not, or whether our societal laws reflect that or not, or whether our personal behavior corresponds to that or not, well, that's a different thing. But according to the karma theory, that would be an objectively real quality of this universe.
Thank you. So let me move to Hope for something related that she's an expert in. How about when people try to do better, but maybe they're not doing so hot? And I am speaking of the humane agriculture. We're not going to have factory farming. We're going to have hearts and flowers in one bad day. You're not a fan of that. Tell us why.
Well, I think it's something we've evolved into now because of the work that we've been doing, Victoria, you and I, and so many others for so many years. We've been exposing the horrors of animal agriculture and what animals endure in farming them. And now we're seeing these labels like cage-free and free range and organic that are telling a story. But of course, we know the reality is that you just can't do you can't do the wrong thing the right way. There's just no way to commodify animals' bodies for their meat, dairy, or eggs in a humane way. So that's the humane hoax that we have a project around and trying to get people to understand. But people care, and that's what the beautiful part of it is, that why are people buying these labels? It's because they care. They care about animals. They don't want animals to suffer. And so they're drawn to these labels. So we have to expose the truth and the reality of any animal farming that's harmful. But that's something interesting about karma. The last question about karma that drew me so much to the Dharma traditions, because I was raised Southern Baptist, born again Christian, and there's still a lot about Christianity that I love. But I swung to atheism because it just didn't resonate with me. And when I went vegan, veganism was really more what felt like a spiritual path to me, right? That seemed more of a spiritual path to me. Being vegan, living nonviolently, trying to have everything in my life be nonviolent. And then Cogen, when we met 25 years ago, we've been married 25 years. This year is our 25-year anniversary. And so he introduced, I was atheist at the time. He was very spiritual, very into Gandhiism and the Dharma traditions. And he introduced that to me. And I was like, oh, this is what spirituality can be. It seems so very different than what I was raised on. And one of the things I loved was karma. This idea that there is a just universe. And even though if you don't see that bad, things that happen bad, there's reaction to that. Even if you don't see it at the time, it will come, or it will evolve or come, with your next life, things like that. Anyway, I loved that idea that there is this just universe, and karma just really resonated with me. And so and I think this is something that overlaps with veganism. We try to see how we can reduce suffering, how we can live our lives in the most nonviolent way. And that's reflected in the Dharma traditions through karma theory, trying to apply ahimsa, nonviolence, and being nonviolent in everything we do.
And Kojin, just quickly, how did you come to your spiritual path?
Uh, well, I lived through a lot of violence as a youth and adolescence. I came from a very violent household, and I kind of was a survivor of a lot of things, and a perpetrator as well. And by the time I was about 20, I just came to really abhor violence. I'd had more than enough of it for my short life at that point, and I just wanted to expunge violence from my psyche, from my surroundings, and to really put an end to it within myself and within my surroundings and my community and the world at large. And it was around that time that I started reading Gandhi, and Gandhi completely transformed how I saw everything. Gandhi was my first guru. You can see I'm obviously a big fan if you can see the picture. Um, and Gandhiism kind of led me to the Bhagavad Gita. I eventually memorized the Yoga Sutra as an undergraduate. I wrote about Gandhi and nonviolent social movements in the world, democratic movements, and nonviolent political strategy, which was something that Hope was also very interested in. I always say that I married Hope because she was the closest thing to Gandhi that I'd ever met. And I still maintain that to this day. I mean, my wife is really, she could be a reincarnation of Gandhi. I admire her so much She's an incredible hero of mine. And I saw her living these Gandhian principles, what I found to be very deeply spiritual principles. And she was an atheist. And, I respected her atheist identity, and I was never going to try to change it. I wanted her just the way she was. But to me, she was still the most spiritual person in the world. Because, as they say, Ahimsa Paramo Dharma, nonviolence is the supreme law of the universe. It's the law that governs all of us. It's our eternal essence is nonviolence. Because karma is ultimately violence. All karma involves consumption. All of our actions involve some kind of consumption. And with any consumption, there's violence somewhere on the supply chain. And so karma is kind of the opposite of what our eternal spiritual essence is. And if karma is characterized by violence, and our spiritual essence is the opposite of karma, then our spiritual essence is nonviolence. And so to discover and to release our internal potential is to realize a nonviolent life. And I saw that Hope, my soon-to-be wife, was living these principles with extraordinary capacity, and I admired her so much, as I do to this day. And that just kind of led me on a spiritual journey. And I just got into Buddhist studies and yoga studies and Hindu studies, and it just kind of all unfolded from there. I don't want to give too long of an answer, but there you go.
So, how do you guys identify? I know at one time you identified as Hindu. Is that still what you say at the proverbial cocktail party, animal rights demonstration? And people say, "Do you have a religion?" What do you tell them?
Well, I'll start. I think that both of us, and I mean, I don't want to speak for Cogen, and I'll let him answer as well. But for me, I feel like we kind of have a hybridized, a hybridized spiritual expression, but definitely rooted in the Dharma traditions. For me, I really resonate with the Jains. I love the Jains so much. They're just learning more and more. Like we did deep dives into Buddhism and Hinduism, and Jains kind of came a little later for us as far as learning about them. And for me, but when I'm still learning, but everything I learned about the Jains is just I resonate so much with it. So I'd say, a hybridized Dharma religion, but we're also kind of exploring veganism as a spiritual expression too. So there's I think it's hybridized, I would say.
Yeah, I think that traditional religious identities look like boxes and checklists. You check these lists, and if you check them all, you're orthodox. If there's one or two you don't check, then you're heterodox. But I follow an orbital model of religious identity, and that means that like wherever I am, there's religious practices happening around me, and the ones that come closer and closer and closer to me, I identify with more, and the ones that don't, I identify with less. But as we often hear, religions are same spiritual path. They all are characterized by nonviolence. So I wouldn't refute any, and I think that the ones that come closer, but that's kind of a more abstract answer. My central religious identity as a Gaudiya Vaishnava is a Hindu. But I have a strong secondary religious identity as a Jain because I accept so much of Jain focus on nonviolence. I think that personally, as a Gaudiya Vaishnava, I'm a monotheist, but I think that monotheism has a way of distracting us from karma, especially concepts like absolution of sins. I think, and I do believe in absolution of sin. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that all philosophies have their benefits and their drawbacks, whether they're right or wrong. All philosophies do. And I think one of the drawbacks of my own religious identity as a monotheist is that it's easy to get centered on the transcendental, to get centered on the extraworldly, and to kind of get degrees approach to spirituality in the hopes of absolution. What I like about Jains is in the absence of a transcendental monotheist, that means the locus of sacrality, the locus of sacredness is within each and every living individual being, whether that's microscopic or human, and we're all going to be born across that spectrum. And I think that the real strength of that is it puts the locus of sacrality within each living being and nowhere else. And so each living being is the divine, is sacred, with no other, with no second. Right. And I think that really gives Jains this very profound emphasis on nonviolence. And I think all the people in the religious world and religious scholars tend to agree that there's something unique and special about the Jain emphasis on nonviolence. So I have to count that as a very, very strong element of my secondary
religious identity. But that being said, I wouldn't say that I'm not a Christian. I wouldn't say I'm not a Buddhist. I wouldn't say I'm not a Jew. I wouldn't say I'm not a, those things are just in various degrees of orbit around me, you know, based on what I've done and what I've chosen and my circumstances.
And that's
Beautiful.
something I just want to mention about him mentioning the all species. That was something that drew me so much to the Dharma traditions, is that all species have to the Jains, it's a jiva, a soul, even microscopic life. You know how the Jain mendicants, the monks and nuns will wear masks on their mouth to not breathe in microscopic animals and hurt them and kill them. I mean, it's just so beautiful. And I love that so much, that there's this real emphasis on protecting the world from violence and harm, and that every living being has a jiva, has a soul. It's just so beautiful.
And if anybody is interested in Jainism, we have had Jains on the Compassion Consortium in the past. You can check out our website, our YouTube channel. Dr. Tushar Mehta was a guest, Sarab Dalal are Jains. And also the movie that's on our website, the Prayer for Compassion, the filmmaker actually interviews some Jain monks who very rarely speak with non-Jains or outsiders, and they have some pretty cool stuff to say about Ahimsa. So in our last 3 minutes, I want to ask you something big. With all of these beautiful teachings, and the beautiful teachings in the Western religions as well, and all the wisdom traditions, why are we still killing one another? Why are we still having wars? What's the deal?
Well, we have karma from our past lives, and every time some of our karma comes to fruition, we have a choice whether to perpetuate that karmic result or whether to stop it. Based on our sensory gratification, own egoistic indulgences, we often choose to perpetuate it. And so it really comes down to human choice, and human choice is, partly ignorance, which comes through our upbringing, comes through our past, what we've done to cultivate knowledge or to cultivate ignorance. And so until we have a widespread spiritual gnosis where people start to construct, to develop who we are as nonviolent beings, then this situation will maintain.
So in the last 2 minutes, I know that you do Ahimsa Living Circle. So tell us what that is and how we can find out more about it.
Yeah, we do. We started just this year. It's brand new. We've just had like 4, I think. We do it monthly, an online gathering similar to this Compassion Consortium called the Ahimsa Living Circle. But ours is focused specifically on the Dharma traditions. So we have the Dharma traditions focus and veganism, and we're kind of exploring veganism as a spiritual expression, similar to what you're doing here. And Cogen is so knowledgeable about the Dharma traditions, incredibly knowledgeable with his, master's in Buddhism and PhD in Hinduism, and doing the work that he does with the Jains. And he gives us a dissertation, a discourse on some aspect of the Dharma traditions. Last month we did Jain meditation, and he dug into some Jain meditation practices that were just really fascinating. With well, I won't get into details.
Okay.
I know you have very little time. Anyway, it's the second Saturday of the month. We wanted to offset it from this one too, so people could come to both. Didn't conflict. Second Saturday of the month, and it's at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I'll put in the chat a link to registration.
Okay.